What if the key to powerful leadership lies within you, hidden beneath old patterns and unhealed emotions? In this episode, I'm joined by Ron Stotts as we explore how conscious self reflection, emotional healing, and reconnecting with your inner wisdom can transform your leadership. We dive into the power of presence, curiosity, and intentionality, revealing how leaders can break free from past cycles and lead with true impact. This goes beyond theory. Ron suggests a path to true leadership and transformation. Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world. Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen. Welcome to Rise to Lead. I am super delighted to sit down today with Ron Stotts from the Seattle area and talk about his very unique experience and approach in the area of conscious leadership and some related topics as well. Hi, Ron.
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. How are you doing yourself?
Doing well, yeah. We got a lovely day ahead of us here, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Yeah. So as we dive into this together, let me quickly have a moment and introduce you to our audience. And then I have the first question for you.
Okay.
Okay. So Ron Stotts is a 3-time best-selling author with a PhD in psychology and a doctor of chiropractic. He has explored the depths of ancient wisdom, I love this personally, and the latest in psychological, neurological studies and leadership as he guides entrepreneurs and executives into the highest levels of conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is definitely something I want to touch on today here with you, Ron. But before we dive into this particular topic, which is very broad and at the same time, I'm really looking here for your unique perspective.
Sure.
Tell us more about Ron Stotts. Who are you? What brought you to where you are today? And what inspired you to do the work you currently do, and especially in the area of conscious leadership and mindfulness in business?
Yeah. I grew up the all-American kid, playing in the woods and playing sports and wasn't very good in school, but I was having fun. And it wasn't until there was the Vietnam War and I decided to join the Marine Corps, kind of following my father's footsteps, from World War II. And that's really when everything shifted, because I realized in my experience there that I really, as athletic and outgoing as I was, that I was a conscientious objector, and that this whole situation I was in was just not a appropriate fit at all. And it really, I lost several dozen close friends in Vietnam, and then had my own, transitions through and all of that, just trying to find my way into life. And, I think what happened was I'd kind of trusted everything that I'd been taught and everything that I'd become up till that point. And I realized, oh, I have to find myself. I have to find out who I am and what my values are, what's important to me. And that was a big shift in my life. And not making anybody wrong, but just recognizing I was different. And that's really when my inner journey began. I had to do a lot of healing. I had to do a lot of just self-discovery and becoming more self-aware and really recognizing what I felt was important in life. And that took me on a very long, deep spiritual journey. It took me on a journey into trying to understand the psychology of me initially, but others and eventually. And I became co-director of a brain integration center as part of my PhD program in psychology. And that helped me to begin to understand the neurology of the brain, which I really hadn't had a concept of before. And it just kept evolving. I ran into, I would run into these amazing teachers. As co-director of the Brain Integration Center, we had just really the best of the best coming to us because we were pretty much leading edge at that time. And so had the benefit in my 20s of taking all of these amazing teacher programs from all these incredible, people who are just really on the leading edge of psychological spiritual development. And then we would co-create, programs together. So it was just this, you know, it had nothing to do with getting pieces of paper. It was just learning from really the best of the best. And that's really what took me to, the heights of my spiritual appreciation, understanding, my appreciation of what the human potential is. And initially it's kind of about yourself, that journey, but then that self becomes others, and that self becomes the world. And so, at some point I said, I really want to create a more caring, compassionate world, a more conscious world, if you will. And I found that I think it was one of my publishers suggested that I had worked with a lot of incredible leaders, but I hadn't thought of them as, oh, that's my target audience or anything. But in understanding the opportunity that a conscious leader has to really not only have an incredible impact on an organization, but to have an incredible and lasting impact in the world, on society. And I thought, well, since my expertise and my ability, my unique ability is to take people into those higher states of consciousness and leadership, that's going to be the way that I'm going to try and create a supportive, conscious world, is by creating those leaders who then affect all of their people and their families and others in the organization. And if I can create enough conscious leaders, then maybe I can create a conscious world. We'll see. I'm in the process.
Yeah, I love that. We can certainly use more of that in
Yeah,
our world. I mean,
certainly.
for everybody who knows what's going on and what's really going on,
Yeah.
we would all agree probably. I mean, in my world, I don't think in right and wrong anymore,
Mm.
because things just are and we create everything. So I need to also take responsibility for this in a
Yeah.
way. However, I do have strong personal preferences. I know what I prefer. I know what I would like to see rather than what I'm seeing now, right?
But I
Not just
think,
in my
yeah.
personal world, but also in leadership, in the world that you touch on, that I touch on, and other leaders touch on. And that's also why I even started this podcast, because
Well,
I could have done
yeah,
something else with my time, right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
although I
we
do
have to
enjoy
be
those posts.
careful of what we put out there, though. I mean, if we're
Right.
upset and angry, that's putting that energy out. So, I mean, I think for people like us, we get to a place where we realize all I can do is really breathe and be curious, breathe and be present, and just serve and support in the best ways that I can. And so that
Right.
becomes a life, a meaningful, mindful life, if you will, that of evolving and developing your consciousness so that you can serve and contribute in a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah. And transmute your own emotions that
Right.
have
Right.
gotten stuck somewhere in the body. And
Exactly. Yeah.
maybe we can talk about that too. You are the chiropractor, right? As well. Have that knowledge too. So totally. And that's actually the anger that is stuck in our body, that is undigested. That's actually the one also, or the sadness or the fear, right?
Yeah.
That
All of
has us create similar experiences all the time that we might actually not desire to have. So it has a lot of benefits to become more aware of our emotions, more aware of our, of course, also self-limiting beliefs and all that, but especially also emotions, and do something with them that actually serves us and those around us better.
Well, I think that's the path to empowerment. That's the path to
Mhm.
higher consciousness. Really begins with healing. As a child, you want love and unconditional love more than anything else, and so you kind of adapt and become who you need to be to be able to get that love from initially your family and then others. And so what do you do with all those emotions? You keep shoving them in and shoving them down, and that is the beginning of the really becoming more self-aware and emotionally intelligent, is to go back in and help heal that inner child, help really access and make conscious all of the 90% of our subconscious thoughts. And that allows the brain to neurologically develop. That allows us to become more aware. And in that awareness, we're able to respond and relate with not only ourselves and others, but the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, yes, children want unconditional love, but is that really unconditional love if they have to comply with what the parents
Exactly.
want? You get it. That's not unconditional. And oftentimes it's not even love. It's just some type of temporary acceptance or whatever it is. So it certainly differs from case to case.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are degrees of that. But also, is it really unconditional? Probably not.
Yeah.
Though we might want to feel that unconditional love as parents, it's not the easiest thing to do. And
Yeah. Well,
especially as, go
I
ahead.
don't think we can give unconditional love unless we unconditionally love ourselves.
Exactly.
Most of us, when we're parents, we're still stumbling into life and trying to figure out who we are with no concept of unconditional acceptance and love of ourselves. And so that's what we pass along, and unfortunately, we're geared, a child is geared that, when they don't get what they want, their initial emotion is anger. And yet that's the least supportive emotion to be expressing to get more love. So they have to shove that anger down. And then the hurt, and then the fear, and then the shame and guilt. They have to just shove all those things down to at least get enough love so that they can develop into an adult. And unfortunately, those old patterns often continue into their adult time. And that's
Yeah.
when it's really crucial for them to go back and heal so that they can really
Right.
recreate themselves.
Yeah, that's when those emotions get stuck. And that's
Yeah.
when we feel those emotions, and then we create those, what you call patterns. I now call them reflections, because they are in a way also a reflection of those emotions that we constantly create over and over and over in our so-called outside world, which we
Right.
might
Yeah.
talk about whether it's really outside or inside, right? That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so let's talk about this a little bit more about this. You told us your reasons why you want to do this work, right? And so what does it take to evolve into this higher level leadership, to call it something?
Well, I think the foundation is what we've been talking about. The mind most people's minds are so noisy, and they're just filled with this, they were only aware of about 10% of our thoughts. The other 90% is just the clutter and the response to all that emotional backlog. And that noisy mind doesn't allow for the brain to develop. the amygdala keeps controlling and regulating our responses rather than the forebrain, which only blossoms when we learn to quiet the brain. So, whether you call it healing the inner child or neurologically rewiring the mind for greater leadership, it's all the same thing. You have to go back in and become more self-aware. You have to look at your life, where you come from, what the experience was, what the emotions that you didn't handle were, and how you can now help that inner child, heal those emotions. Any emotion that a child has that they don't know what to deal with, they don't have the support to deal with, they're going to shove down. And that's a considerable amount. And then they also inherit emotions from their family, their emotional family tree. That becomes part of who they are. So I think I don't know how you can do it without going back in and really cleaning up, pruning that emotional family tree, if you will, so that it's all prepared to really, flourish. And I just can't emphasize enough how much that neurologically creates an integrated whole brain thinking opportunity, but it also, the forebrain becomes the CEO, the conscious CEO of your life. But that also, in my more advanced work, it becomes, you learn to, rather than trying and efforting, which we used in that left brain efforting mode to get to where we've gotten to, we learn to quiet the mind. We learn to breathe and be more present and quiet the mind and access a higher level of wisdom. And that higher level of wisdom saves us a tremendous amount of time. And it's the only way we can really keep up in this rapidly changing, ever more complex business world and general world that we're living in. So we have to evolve. That's really, we just don't have any choice. We either evolve or we're going to be left behind, and that's why I think most people just go up to that mid-level leadership rather than that top 10%, where they have to really become more conscious, more aware, so that they can relate not only better with themselves, but others.
Or they go up and they actually are not so great leaders that you want to see. That happens too. It happens a lot, actually. Okay. So I want to pick up a few things that I always find interesting to look at. And I want your take. I, of course, have my own, thinking about it as well. I do a lot of this work myself.
Yeah, right.
So what would you say to people who say, oh, but you know what? I'm just going to focus on positive thinking.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great plan, but it just doesn't work.
I love it.
What they're
I'm with you.
saying is, I'm going to focus on that 5 to 10% of thought that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of friends in the personal growth field who market things that are all about just positive this or focus on that and everything will be fine. But focusing on that 10% of what you're aware you're thinking only works for a couple of weeks before that 90% of subconscious thoughts, unhealed emotional issues, just sort of washes it away. All of a sudden, that big plan is forgotten or lost, and the painful part for me is that then people begin to think, well, maybe there's something really wrong with me. Maybe I'm not fixable. And that's such a shame, because they certainly are, and they're certainly capable of moving into any level of consciousness they want. But you can't do it by avoiding. You have to do it by embracing and accepting yourself.
Yes, and by sometimes also doing the work that is a little bit more uncomfortable in the moment, but can then also, and that's the great news, give you some very surprising relief.
No, incredible. Yeah, incredible.
And that is the beauty of it. So you go into it for a limited period of time, which doesn't have to be super long.
No.
And then you might have to repeat it a few times, okay, admittedly. And then you come out of it, and it's just amazing, the relief that you can feel instantly, but also the the consequences that come from it, and what shows up in your so-called external world, right? As a result.
My initial program is only 2 months. And that's where they do that foundational inner work and become more emotionally aware and healed. But that doesn't mean other things won't come up. But they've
Yeah.
learned how to embrace those things. They've learned how to breathe into them and heal those things so that they can continue to evolve when and if those other things come up. But yeah, it opens you. I mean, initially people kind of come in with trepidation and angst and whatnot, and they're afraid what's going to happen. But I would say 99% of the time turns into one of the greatest adventures of their life as they begin to understand and empower themselves to live that life that they truly want.
Yeah, and realize that only they can empower themselves. Actually, no one else
Only
can
they.
empower
That's
them.
exactly
Everybody
right.
says, "Oh, empower you." No, I can't.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my
Yeah.
job.
Uh,
So, yeah. So I love this, and it's also about really, in my opinion, okay, making it a way of living.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not just about a few sessions. They are great, and you can do them again, and you can do more sessions, and it's always helpful. And you will always get to the so-called next level or pull away more layers,
Right.
definitely. And at the same time, the more you also apply what Ron and I and other people like us teach, the more you you will actually see it in your life, reflected in your life, and the calmer you will become, and the more peace you will feel, the more freedom you will feel, the more powerful you will feel. And of course, when Ron and I talk, and I'm going to just include you here, Ron, talk about power, we usually talk about inner power, right? So
Well,
it's,
it's really your I and I this let's explore this for just a second. For
yeah.
me, it's gotten to a place where the more you can open up your heart, and of
Mhm.
course that opens up your mind, but the more you open up your heart, the more power you have. And so really that's what power is an open heart, an open mind. In other words, you're fully whole, that you're a confident developed human being who's
Yeah.
capable of, authenticity.
Yeah, that mind coherence, heart coherence, and you might like that. I'm in one of my leadership frameworks. I have one column of that is called the self-empowering mindset and heart set.
There
So
you
you might
go. I like
like
that. We're on the
that.
same
Okay,
page.
so let's talk about another aspect that you mentioned, this efforting idea, right? I just recently again wrote an article about the efforting and how we could potentially effort less if
Most certainly.
we actually, and I also think it's interesting to see, and I believe I know why that is, right? But we don't need to go into the reason why this hard work concept is worshipped as if it was an altar almost or something. It's everybody talks about, oh, this hard work, and I'm so proud of being such a hard work, and I I always have to smile a bit because I say, why would you want that?
Right, right. Well, I think that they like to, it starts off early with
Yeah.
them learning, they get acknowledgement, they get recognition for being smart, and they go, okay, well, I'll just develop that left brain and I'll get into the right college and that'll get me the right job. The
Mhm.
problem with that in today's business world is having that left brain ability to take care of, I call it whack-a-mole because they're always taking care of the immediate little problems, but it doesn't give them the broader knowledge to really to work supportively with others, to create safe, supportive environments where people are more collaborative and cooperative, and that results in more productivity and profits. And so that's where the C-suites run into problems is they've developed that aspect of themselves, that trying and efforting and getting rewarded for taking care of the immediate problems, but they haven't developed that bigger picture, that integrated whole brain perspective that allows them to really see what's going on and to use the left brain to see the optimum path to resolving that. And you have to become more present. You have to become more aware. And we talked about it before. all of that allows you to become more conscious. And consciousness is really your level of awareness of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how aware am I of what, where I'm in this particular moment. And, I see consciousness is really everything. It's really the more conscious that I am, the more, I'm going to see things differently. I'm going to experience everything that comes into my life differently, and I'm going to respond to it differently. At this point in my life, I see everything that comes into my life, no matter how horrendous it might appear, as an opportunity. I know there's critical opportunity in there for my own growth and development and ability to serve and support the world.
Yeah. So how is this for me, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, why is this happening again?
Why me? Yes. Like
Yeah,
what?
well, yeah. So, and then there's always an answer, even when there doesn't seem to be one. Just
Right.
like there's always a choice, even when there doesn't seem to be one, and there are actually unlimited choices. And I love the consciousness. How you said that now, Ron.
Mhm.
Consciousness is a word that has, of course, we are consciousness also,
Yeah.
right? So there's different
There is
ways of
that.
using the word for sure. However, we have consciousness, we are consciousness. Yeah. And it's like with energy. We are energy and we have energy, and so sometimes it's hard because everything is energy and everything is consciousness in the end. So how do we use those words? I just think it's interesting. It's not that
Well,
one way is wrong and the other is right.
I mean, meditation is a big part of my life. And
Yeah.
when you dissolve in the oneness, you realize, well, once you dissolve, there's no you to realize anything. But as you come back into the separateness of self, you realize you are one with everything.
Yeah.
That everything is nothing but consciousness, expressing consciousness and experiencing consciousness, and you're just an aspect of that. And the higher level of consciousness you're in, the more coherent, the more collaborative, the more ease that you'll feel in your life, because
Yeah.
you're paddling a canoe down a stream rather than, fighting the rapids with an inadequate craft. Yeah.
Right. And separation is really just a perception or an illusion anyway, but yes,
Yeah.
we need it to function in
Well,
a
yeah,
material
yeah.
world, which is also not a material world.
Yeah. And I
But
enjoy
anyway,
it.
you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you've mentioned a few challenges that you see your clients facing, right? Because of also our upbringing, our education, and the whole school system and how it's built to prepare us in that way, and quite intentionally, I might say. So, and we're leaving the rest behind, and we're not really developing those other many aspects of our creative power.
The
So
best of who we are. We're leaving it
yeah,
behind. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, you said it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
what are some other common challenges that come to mind, that you see your clients facing?
Well, I think the biggest problem, in leadership is they're looking outside of themselves for what can only be found within. And the reason they're doing that is because they're lost up in that logical left brain arena. And, that's the tool, that's the vehicle they use to move through the world.
Mhm,
What I watch is they respond to everything by not breathing. They
mhm.
hold their breath and go up in their head and look for answers, where the answer is by breathing and going into the wholeness of who you are, connecting with your feelings, connecting with your heart, connecting with your mind. And so that's the first thing that I'm teaching people is breathe. Because if you're not breathing, you're not aware. If you're not breathing, you're not aware of what you're feeling. If you're not breathing, you're giving up your power. You're giving up your power to others. And so it's really a matter of learning to breathe so that you can feel, learning to breathe so that you can heal, and learning to breathe so that you can learn to access and become whole again and be able to create that life that you long for. Yeah.
Right. And breathing is also the only way you can be truly present with the people
Indeed.
around you,
Indeed. Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
team, other people in the company, your business partners, whoever it is, your clients, right? Yeah. You might also like an episode that I did with Brian D. Ridgway in as part of this podcast. I think you might enjoy that, just saying as a side,
Yeah.
because he talks a lot about breathing in a very, in his very own way, which actually is also our natural way. And maybe it's even the same. I have not experienced yours. Yeah, just as a side.
Yeah.
We,
Well, breathing for me it's the focus of my meditation that allows
yeah.
me to quiet my mind and move into any state of consciousness that I want. It's
Mhm,
the thing that allows me to be present enough and heal whatever might be coming up in my life.
mhm,
I'll be honest with you. I've gotten to a place where I think the only thing that I ever need to do is breathe, be curious, and present. That's really all I can, I don't have to think, I don't have to do, I don't have to be. That's all I have to do. When I'm sitting with clients, that's what allows me to say the wise things that I say. It's not me, it's just coming through when you're playing on that level. You're connected to a bigger, the wholeness of what we are. And that's what's exciting, is to watch clients begin to access that and use that in their business and create safe, supportive environments for their families, for their employees, and to be able to access levels of genius in creating new things that contribute to making the world a better place.
yeah.
It's exciting. I love it.
Yeah, it's also one of the principles of co-creation. I heard you also use that verb earlier in your own work, right? You co-create with others, and yeah, and also curious. I love that you mentioned curious also, because I think that curiosity is really one of the most underrated leadership traits.
That
It's
might be called
definitely
being present.
exactly, yeah, yes. And yeah, and that's also how you will bring out those potential $1 million or $1 billion ideas in your team.
And I see it. I literally do see it. I mean, I had a fellow, he had 5 businesses. They were all like 8, 9-figure businesses, very successful, but he was trying to micromanage all of them. So he brought me a lot of his C-suites, who then became the CEOs of those various organizations. And a very smart guy. He started to focus, he started living his life. He was like 60 and he started living his life. The love of his life came back into his life. His kids started reconnecting with him, but he started taking time and doing some traveling. But he also said the most fascinating part of all of my different organizations is this one aspect of one of my organizations. So he started really exploring that. And from that one thing, he's now creating a 6th organization that's going to be more successful than all the other 5 combined. And that's that brilliance that he's accessing. That's the ability that, by flooding himself with all the busyness, as we were talking about earlier, as you learn to quiet your mind, that's where you're really going to access the best of who and what you are. That's where your brilliance, that's where your wisdom lies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how long does it take for you to guide someone into those highest levels of leadership?
Well, it's the old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink thing. And
Right.
the easy, if somebody is really excited and trusting and they're on board, which I would say most people are when they come to work with me. It takes a couple of months to get the foundation taken care of. That's that more self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and healed in many, many ways. But it usually takes about another 9 months for us to integrate that all into their life. All those old habits keep kind of sneaking in, and it's like kind of minor corrections as they continue to evolve. And as they learn to become more mindful, as they have what I call significant personal experiences during that time, they become more conscious, they become more aware, and I would say potentially within that 2 and then 9 month period, I see people beginning to tap into what I call big mind. For many, it might take, another 6 months to a year. It depends. Nothing wrong with that. That's not like, it's still an incredible pace to shift from, that mid-level, leadership to the highest levels of leadership. And I see them doing that all the time. So it's exciting.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add that I have not asked you about that you think is absolutely must be said and our leaders should hear?
Well,
Our leaders and any listeners should hear.
well, everybody's a leader. I
A
mean,
leader in their own way. I totally
yeah, yeah. You know, I see so many people struggling and they don't realize that they're struggling because, well, let me kind of shift analogies. It's like they've got one foot on the gas pedal of life and they're moving forward in life to whatever level of success they're having, oftentimes quite successfully. But what they don't understand is that they've got the other foot on the brake of life. And they're trying to control all that emotional backlog. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to be acceptable. They're trying to be somebody other than their confident, authentic self. So our job, you and I and others, is really to help them take their foot off that brake, heal all of those things that they're trying to control, and learn to let go. And as they let go and they learn to breathe, they learn to accept and connect with all of who and what they are, their true potential. They begin to understand, they see and react to life differently, as we talked about earlier. They begin to see solutions where, they see opportunity where they only saw challenge before. And so if I could just encourage people, I understand that it feels unsafe. I understand that it's scary. I understand all of that. But take your foot off the brake, heal those things and become whole so that you understand your full capability. I mean, we're just amazing things. I mean, again, I want you to understand, I grew up just the all-American kid. I was not good in school. My expertise in school was looking out the window. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I was suicidal and I was a total mess, and I had to reconnect with myself, recollect myself too, and become whole. And so it's not like, you know, they see people when they get to this level and go, gee, I could never be that. Well, it's just a choice. It's just a matter of taking those steps to continue. As you mentioned before, life isn't about getting locked into a limited comfort zone. It's about learning to evolve. It's about learning to live mindfully and present and evolving, because the one constant that everybody's afraid of is change. And that is the only constant in our life is change. So if we can't breathe and be present and embrace that change, then we're struggling against ourselves. We're limiting ourselves. So, I have to say that the universe is rigged, and it's rigged in our favor. It is literally there to support us. If anybody looks at, when I look at my time in the Marine Corps, it was the worst year of my life. But because of how I dealt with it, it became the most transformative and best year of my entire life. And I think most people, if they look back at the worst things that have happened in their life, if they've dealt with them consciously or as best they could, they're going to recognize that those are some of the best aspects of their life. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's why there is really no worst or best, because who decides that anyway? And it always depends on what perspective you take, right?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that and adding that. Very helpful. So where can people find you?
Well, probably just my website's the easiest thing. It's Ron Stotts, STOTTS.com. Ron, RON, STOTTS.com. And, there's free information there. There's materials there that they can use to begin their own inner journey. There's breath work, programs there. There's, certainly explanations of my other programs. But yeah, I encourage people to go there because there's a lot of material there that they can just begin to use to explore their own life and move forward.
Right. Right. And just because I touched on it before, and I'm going to definitely also add those links, of course, in the description to the episode. Just because I mentioned it before, let's just quickly maybe touch on the relation between emotion and sensation in the body. If you want to talk about that, do you have any experience working with that?
Well, I think if you're not feeling your emotions, you're not feeling, and that's
Yeah.
you're
I'm saying the sensations that,
disconnected from
more the
the body.
physical sensations.
Yeah, you are literally disconnecting yourself from both your physical and mental being. And, you're closing your heart, you're closing your mind, you're shutting yourself off from your body. You aren't as aware, you're not as sensitive. And that, in terms of, a chiropractor is really, they're nothing but an electrician looking for short circuits in the body. And that's really what a chiropractor does, is they look for short circuits, and those short circuits are symptomatic in terms of things being misaligned and the nerves overstimulating muscle, which pulls the bone out of alignment, that kind of thing. And so what they're doing is just trying to keep that nervous system in alignment, and so that everything is working properly, that the communication to the organs from the brain and vice versa is happening. So, if you're not breathing, if you're not healing, if you've got emotional backlog, then all of that is going to run into challenges, both physically and mentally and spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Ron, for being here with us today and for sharing some wonderful wisdom nuggets that I'm sure our listeners will benefit from.
Yeah. Good.
Yes, and to everyone, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hope everybody enjoyed it and got a little bit out of it. Yeah.
I'm sure they did and will, those who will still listen. Okay, so to everybody also, a quick reminder that my book, Living My Freaking Amazing Life, Create the Life That's Perfect for You Anywhere in the World, is now also available in Portuguese. So if you love to read in Portuguese, or if you have any friends in Brazil, Portugal, Angola, Mozambique, or anywhere else where the Portuguese language is spoken, then definitely check it out. And maybe it's a great gift for your friends or family there. If you want to become a thriving leader with a life that's aligned with your passions and preferred lifestyle, then this book is for you, whether you read it in English or in Portuguese, and you'll find both versions on Amazon as Kindle and in print. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you like this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.